Okay, so let's get started. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the second lesson of the SmartEnCity Academy towards zero carbon transition. Today, we will be focusing on the topic of how to master governance and political barriers. We are very happy that so many of you have joined today. My name is Bettina Remmele, and I am working for Steinbeis Europazentrum. And within SmartEnCity, together with my colleague Heike Ifland, who is here today as well, we are the main responsible partner for all things related to dissemination and communication of our project's results. Heike, as I said, is also here today, and she will collect all your incoming questions, which you can submit via the chat box to the organizers. And she will speak up later as well. To make sure that all our internet connections will remain stable today, as I think most of us are working from home office lately, the speakers of the session will all very briefly turn on your cameras, like me now, say hi to you all so that you will know who will be speaking to you, but then we will turn them off again to ensure good connection for everybody so that everybody can follow. Okay, so before we start with the actual training course, let me briefly introduce to you the SmartEnCity project. Okay, so SmartEnCity is one of now 17 smart city projects funded by the European Union's Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Program. In SmartEnCity, we have 3 lighthouse cities and 2 follower cities. Our lighthouse cities are Sonderburg in Denmark, Tartu in Estonia, and Vitoria-Gasteiz in Spain. Our follower cities are Lecce in Italy and Asinovgrad in Bulgaria. And I'll just turn off my camera to make the bandwidth work better. So goodbye, everyone, but you will continue to hear my voice. And please, everybody, mute yourself for the presentation to make sure that we can follow each other well. Okay, so yeah, let me continue with the presentation. So overall, we are 37 partners from 6 different countries within Europe working on the project SmartEnCity. We have started in February 2016, and we will end next year in July after 5.5 successful years. The SmartEnCity Academy is an online training course for cities, municipalities, and smart decision-making, but of course the Academy also addresses the scientific community and anybody else interested in the topics that we are discussing here. The contents of this training course have been tailored to the participants' needs, and it is supposed to provide a step-by-step guidance for your own journey towards zero carbon transition. We are looking forward to have many interactive discussions with you all today and during the next 2 lessons. And we already had really good discussions in our first lesson, which took part on the 20th of February. There we introduced the overall concept of the Cities for Zero strategy. You can rewatch a recording of that first lesson at our SmartEnCity website in case you missed it, and you can also check out the recording at our YouTube channel. If you would like to learn more about the SmartEnCity Academy and our future lessons, please also have a look at our website. The 3rd lesson, focusing on city analysis, will take place on the 4th of June, so you can already mark that in your calendars if you wish. In case you have any questions after the training course today or any time in the upcoming weeks, you can always send an email to info@smartencity.eu and we will get back to you. And then there's one last thing before we get started. Please note that this lesson will also be recorded and then uploaded to our website. So by staying in this training course, you automatically agree to the recording. Okay, so let's get started. The title of the second lesson today is Mastering Governance and Political Barriers, Engage and Integrate. The lesson will be moderated by our project coordinator, Francisco Rodriguez Perez Curiel from Tecnalia Research and Innovation. Francisco Rodriguez is an architect with more than 10 years of experience in research in the areas of urban sustainability and energy transition. He is currently Project Director in the Building Technologies Division of Technalia Research and Innovation. He has already coordinated several FP7 and also Horizon 2020 projects related to this matter. As I said, he is the project coordinator of our project of SmartEnCity, and he is also the Spanish representative in the Energy in Buildings and Communities Technology Collaboration Program. That was a long name. The short name is EBC-TCP of the International Energy Agency. The second lesson today will start with an introduction by Fran himself. Then, 3 experts from our lighthouse cities and 1 external guest speaker will speak about their experiences with tackling political barriers. Peter Ratje from ProjectZero will speak about the Sonderborg approach. Raimund Tam, Deputy Mayor of the city of Tartu, will speak about the Tartu approach. And finally, Juan Carlos Escudero from the city of Vitoria-Gasteiz will speak about the approach from our Spanish lighthouse city. Finally, we also welcome a special guest speaker today, who is Baha Kuban from Deme Energy, and he will give an external insight into how governance is handled in other smart city projects. Afterwards, there will be a panel discussion with all 4 speakers, and of course with you, the participants. So we really encourage you to participate in the panel discussion, because this is really the point where you can address your personal questions and where you can get into a contact with our speakers and our experts. Here we can also see who the speakers of our session today will be, but as I said, they will also present themselves via the webcam themselves as well. So we have Fran, the moderator, on the left, followed by Peter Ratje from Sonderborg. Then in the middle we have Raimund Tam from Tartu, followed by Juan Carlos from Vitoria, and Baha Kuban from Deme Energy. Okay, so now we will get started with the first presentation, with the introduction by Francisco, and I hand over to you, Fran. You can get started.
Thank you very much, Bettina, and thank you everyone for being here today with us. This is the second lesson, as Bettina said, of the SmartEnCity Academy for Smart Zero Transition. And I'm very happy to have you as part of this second lesson. This lesson, we want it to be interactive, so you can use the chat box to address questions to us, the speakers, and then during the panel discussion, they will be brought up to the session. So, as Bettina said, I'm going to turn off the camera now and let you concentrate on my presentation. So I'm just going to provide you with a brief introduction to the subject of today, which is mastering governance and political barriers in urban transformation. So check if I can. Okay, yeah, sorry. Yeah. So first of all, what I wanted to let you know is the experience that SCC1 projects are gathering all around Europe. As you know, the Lighthouse projects, SCC1 projects funded by the European Commission, are currently 17 projects spanning throughout Europe and working on several areas of urban transformation. As Bettina explained, I will not go into details again, but I just want to concentrate on the common points or the commonalities that all the projects share. Urban transformation is built on the foundation of these commonalities. And this is the way we are trying to change things in the cities that you see in the map. The map represents all the cities, both the lighthouse and the fellow cities, lighthouse in white dots, and fellow cities in gray, from these 17 projects. And well, there are many commonalities. I will not go into everything, but relevant for today, I would like to highlight 5 main commonalities. all the cities working in these projects have a strong political commitment towards long-term transition strategies. They have a plan, they have a vision, and they want to realize this plan over the medium and long term. The second commonality, the second common area is a focus on or reliance on technology to realize this change. Technology, yes, but not only technology, as we will see. The third one is, and this is a bit of a consequence as well, is in all of these cities we are seeing or we are detecting that the governance structures for change are new, innovative. So all the structures to run or to operate the urban transformations or urban dynamics are changing and are adapting to the new times, and they are adapting to new objectives as well. So we are going to look into this during these presentations as well, and you will find good examples in the presentations. Last but not least, we are seeing that these visions, these long-term visions on one hand, the plans and the actions that derive from these plans are not top-down, they are not imposed by public authorities, because this way things will not work, but there is a co-ownership. There are several stakeholders which are very relevant for the cities and for city transformation, and this way of doing things, this way of working towards sustainability in transformations of cities needs to have the participation of all of these stakeholders. Everyone needs to co-own, need to make themselves a part of these plans, of these actions. And last but not least, this leads to replication of the plans. These projects are demonstrations projects. We are testing actions, testing technologies, testing different business models in demonstration areas, but the goal is to then transfer this knowledge or then extend these actions throughout other areas of the cities working in demonstration, to other cities all around Europe. So this is an important part of the project and something that is being worked as well. So I mentioned, oh, sorry, this is moving too fast. This one. So this is the first commonality is in what we call the city journey, the journey of a city through transition towards zero energy, or towards zero emissions, which is the vision and the goals the city has. And this vision has a number of key characteristics that imply long-term political vision and commitment. This is not a plan that can be executed in 1-2 years. It's a long-term plan, and it implies and requires long-term vision and long-term commitment, which typically goes beyond the one mandate, political mandates, or two political mandates. So this is a challenge in itself, and needs to involve or needs to have a wide or broad agreement to be successful. So this is one of the first common characteristics. And this is not only a matter of being carbon neutral. This is not only, okay, let's be carbon neutral by 2050, but it has to be another different set of drivers. It has to be, or it typically is, more complex and relies and links to other city goals, to other region goals, which typically have to do with area revitalization. Many cities are using part of their processes to bring new life to their areas as an excuse or as a driver to make more profound transformations in the way they deal with energy transition in the cities. So they plant a seed in these areas, a seed that then through replication can be extended to other areas. This is what the Lighthouse projects are doing, and this is a very common or very typical way of proceeding in these kind of plans. Of course, this speaks about specificity. And this means no copy-paste is possible. You cannot take a plan from city A and then apply a magic recipe to city B, expecting it to work. There will be specific needs, there will be a specific context, and specific solutions need to be developed. Of course, this doesn't mean that parts of these solutions, part of these strategies cannot be used in different cities and cannot be adapted from one city to another. But in any case, this needs to be a local journey and single solution and something very specific to the city. And of course, this cannot be done by the city administration in itself. And this takes me to the next point. So this is a common journey. So the vision and the goals must be common, and there are many people aside from the public administration that needs to make this happen. So in the city, we have many stakeholders aside from the public administration. Of course, the citizenship is key for everyone, and we will talk about this, but also the academia, the industry, NGOs, many local stakeholders that need to co-own and they need to play a key part of the city journey towards carbon neutrality. And we will see example of this. So the local ecosystem with all the stakeholders taking place and having their voice in the transition journey, in the vision, in the plans, and in the actions is key for the success of the transition. And this needs to entail a change of mindset in the stakeholders. Old ways of working as a public administration, as an industry, as an NGO, tend to not work under this scenario. And new ways of working together need to be developed in the local setting. Of course, this doesn't mean there are many barriers to address or many barriers to jump over, and these have, in many cases, have to do with citizenships. Citizenships need to be part of the integral solution, need to be part of the journey, and this means that a strong effort has to be done in informing citizens, creating awareness in citizens in the main topics that we are addressing here: climate change, the urban challenge, urban transformation. And this needs to be a dialogue, not a monologue, not a top-down approach with the city officials and the politicians defining a vision and telling the people what it should be, but the people also speaking, the people also contributing to the vision and establishing an effective dialogue. So communication with the citizens is key. And the main messages that need to be transferred to the citizenship and the main subject that needs to be discussed and developed together with citizenship need to be focused on the benefits. Otherwise, the engagement will not work. This is part of our experience in the projects. So the benefits can be economic, social, environmental benefits, and most importantly, benefits, any kind of benefit that means improvement of quality of life of the individuals and the people. Last but not least, I wanted to speak about the tension or the friction between innovative actions deployed in the cities, as is the case of these projects, and regulations and the status quo of things in general. We understand that sustainable urban development implies doing things differently, doing new things differently, and using new technologies, and this has several implications. The first of which is, in many cases, national, EU, also local regulations are not prepared for this kind of innovation, not only for the technologies itself, and we could speak about building codes, regulations. Well, in each domain that we address, we will find this kind of barriers or problems related to regulations. If we speak about buildings, we can talk about building codes and how they deal or don't deal with energy consumption, this kind of things. If we speak about transport, well, there is regulation barriers in how we can deploy, for example, electromobility solutions or this kind of solutions, linking new energy flows within the cities with the way people move in the city, be it public or private transport. Public procurement is another issue. Public procurement of innovation is a hard issue for many public administrations who lack knowledge and lack capacity to deal with this new kind of procurement. When we speak about ICT and the immense amount of data that is being gathered nowadays in the urban environment, data governance issues are being raised constantly. There are many areas where there is a friction between a new way of doing things and the regulation, the current status quo of regulation, legislation, and so on. And this is something that speaks about the necessity of new structure, of new ways of doing things. Last but not least, and going back to the issue of citizens, we also need to be aware that to have citizens on board and to ultimately succeed in implementing these changes in the urban environment, citizens and citizenship has to be on our side. And this is complex in the case of innovation sometimes, because innovation is oftentimes not understood and not accepted because of that by the population. So once again, strong efforts in communications, including citizens from the very beginning when we are planning and envisioning where we want to go, and create awareness on the medium or long term with these strong efforts is a very important part of it has to be a very important part from the beginning of this journey and has to be a major part of the efforts to realize the city transition. So, yeah, this is what I had for you as an introduction. I think this is the thing we need to get out of the way in the beginning, because the real interesting part of the lesson today comes from real life experiences from the cities, real life experiences from our experts in the 3 lighthouse cities in SmartEnCity, and from the external expert, Mr. Bahakovan, as well. So without further ado, I will give the floor to our next presenter. He's Peter Raje. He is coming from Sonderborg in Denmark. Peter has a background on business economics and leadership, and he's been, since 2007, he's been responsible for ProjectZero in Sonderborg. And ProjectZero is one of these new structures I was talking about. But ProjectZero is a public-private partnership whose main purpose is to turn Sonderborg, the city of Sonderborg, zero carbon or carbon neutral by 2029. That is in 9 years' time. They have been working on this for a number of years, and they have already achieved outstanding results. So his main responsibilities in this is managing. He's the main manager of the ProjectZero company, and he is currently implementing the roadmap to 2025 for carbon neutral Sonderborg, and doing whatever is necessary for achieving the zero objective of Sonderborg. So, Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fran. Thank you for setting the frame for this afternoon presentation, and also for the introduction. I will give a little bit background about Sonderborg. You already provided, I think, some of the basics, and then I will go a little bit deeper into the governance and the challenges and barriers and the role of the city council, which is still important. We cannot do this only working with citizens. I'll switch off my camera and take you into my presentation. Sonderborg municipality is a small, medium-sized municipality, less than 100,000 citizens, a lot of territory, 2/3 of the territory actually on an island well connected to the mainland Europe, a lot of industry, a lot of classical manufacturing, mechanical industry, but also a lot of farming and food production. And normally we also have a lot of tourists here. Unfortunately, due to the corona crisis, this area is also affected by lack of tourism, people who cannot travel and relax like they used to. The ambition, as also Francisco mentioned, has been since 2007, for almost 13 years, to transition this community, society, this municipality, whatever it takes, with its citizens, with its businesses, with its shops, with its many farmers, into a zero carbon community. So far, we measure every year. I'll talk a little bit about this routine here. We measure every year, but by the end of 2018, we had achieved almost a 40% carbon reduction. What is special in our approach here is that the think tank, the local think tank who created the vision of a zero carbon Sonderborg back in 2007, had the belief that this could only be achieved in a cooperation between the public parties, the city council, the municipality, and all local public bodies, but also with a strong engagement of the private sector. Let me say that if only the municipality focused on what they could do with their buildings, only 2.7% of the entire carbon emissions would be removed. So I tend to say in Sonderborg we focus on the 100%, and the 100% is equivalent to 700,000 tons of carbon emissions. And when we talk about the transition journey, it is taking that big figure into zero. And the way, or you could say the starting point is, so what is 1 ton of carbon emission? 1 ton of carbon emission is, as, and you will find out that in Sonderborg most people will know this is the content of this big balloon, 10 meters in diameter. And we had to visualize this, because who would ever know how much at 1 ton of carbon is? So this is visualized, and here you see also citizens busy around 1 ton of carbon, but we have 700,000 tons of carbon to be removed. It's not only about energy and climate. For the city council, for the businesses, for the citizens here, it's also about an opportunity to create jobs. We call them, of course, green jobs. It's also about, when we do this transition, we hopefully end up with creating an even better life of people living or being tourists or just visiting Sonderborg. This all is contained in Sonderborg's ProjectZero vision. The journey, so to say, started with 700,000 tons of carbon in 2007, and it ends with a big zero. This big zero is addressing all energy system related emissions from energy consumption, from energy production. So there's still, you could say, activities, import is not included, like export is is taken care of as part of our accounting. This is all very well documented in our roadmap 2025. We like to take these steps in steps of 5 years, so we are very committed to 5-year planning, and I will also address this in my presentation. This plan consists of actually not one single mean that cures everything, but 52 different transition projects, some of them bigger than others, but all of them very important. And they are, like Francisco also mentioned, they are addressing the energy consumption, the energy production, the transport. It's very important when you want to transition a society, community, a municipality, that you have this politicians, you have the city council on board, you have a shared vision, you have the authority, the planning authority, and you also address the education system. Here in Sonderborg, we have a saying, from kindergarten to PhD, they need to be engaged. So this is about very early engagement. But as I mentioned, if what you can do with the municipal buildings only address 2.7% of the carbon emissions of the entire area, you should aim for much more. And this much more, as I also mentioned, in Sonderborg have become a public-private partnership. The name is ProjectZero. The name was given because of the transition into a zero carbon community. On this slide here, you will see some legal structures. There's a foundation, there's a company. There are founding fathers and mothers, you could say. In blue here, local companies, the municipality, the municipal utility companies. We have university on board, we have national bank, we have national energy company, and of course we have all the communities, the networks of citizens in villages, in house associations. We have the big companies, we have the small companies, we have the farmers, and of course there's also in our governance structure here a very close link to the city council. We act after a simple model, which I think is maybe more common in business life. It's called plan, do, check, act. So when we did the roadmap 2025, we followed this for the planning. We are in the do phase. We monitor every year the impact, the performance of the plan, and we correct or we improve, or we act as it's being mentioned here. Also, when we have more specific projects like with house associations or with the district heating companies, we follow the same methodology here, very simple, but I think actually very well functioning. And this is a very open procedure. Also, our annual monitoring is shared. A few words about when we had the roadmap 2025 planning process. We, as I mentioned, have 76,000 citizens, so we cannot have them all on board, but it was very important to have not only the politicians, the city council, but also representatives from society. We very often call them experts or stakeholders. So more than 100 local expert stakeholders were involved. They were on a joint journey. The journey had 8 steps. It started with the city council approving, endorsing this planning cycle. Here we went through scenario process. We had a kickoff for the 100 people because they were not all 100 involved in the scenario. We segmented the many people into 8 working groups. We had expert, we had university help us do energy modeling. We spent a lot of time in the working groups and in joint sessions to discuss, and we also cared for the reporting to make sure that people who were not involved in this could study the outcome and engage themselves at a later stage. where we are now is that it was all very well created, and the same stakeholders, the more than 100 people, are now busy supporting the execution of the roadmap, and no longer just our or the city council's 52 projects, but their 52 projects. So this is definitely also an efficient way to create co-ownership. So, as we all know, there's another crisis which is right now overshadowing the climate crisis, but it's time to act. I think we see a lot of actions with the Corona crisis. Here in Denmark, we also see the way out of the Corona crisis is taking more combined actions and new initiatives, business initiatives with the climate crisis. Having a plan already, I think, makes life much easier, because, as I mentioned, one crisis is also an opportunity to act, and also having the shared responsibilities, I think, is really core in Sonderborg's transition. Thank you for listening. I will be part of the discussion later, but I will mute myself.
Thank you very much, Peter, for your very interesting presentation, and I am sure that the audience will have many questions to address. So don't forget, you have the chat box on the right of your screen. Top right of your screen, you have an icon to activate the chat box, so you can address your questions there. So thank you very much, Peter, and we are going to go to the next presenter, who is Raymond Tam from the city of Tartu. Raymond works as a deputy mayor for the city of Tartu in Estonia, and he's responsible for communal services, city transport, entrepreneurship, and innovation. His fields of expertise are entrepreneurship, smart cities, spatial planning, energy policy, economic policy, and environmental policy. Raymond is also the local coordinator of the SmartEnCity Lighthouse project in Tartu, which is about the development of and implementation of the integrated smart city solutions within the project. So thank you for being here, Raymond, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Fran. So I hope everybody can listen to me. So I'm sending you, of course, good thoughts from the city of good thoughts here in Tartu. So I'm sending you the best greetings. I hope every one of you is fine despite of the crisis what we have, and we have managed to change our work habits. So I will speak about some of the experiences, some of the tricks and tips what we have gathered here in our city. So I hope you will find those useful, and of course, as I'm representing the city, I will mainly speak from the city point of view. So I hope you will enjoy, and it will be useful for you. So I will just take off. I'm trying to switch the slides now. Yeah, it's happening. So a few words about Tartu. Tartu is the second largest city in Estonia. So we have roughly 100,000 inhabitants. And then also we are one of the oldest university cities in Northern Europe. So the University of Tartu was founded in 1632. And it has, of course, changed our city remarkably. Estonia overall, as you know, is well known for the expansive usage of electronic and mobile services at the state level, but of course also at the municipal level. So that's why also in the current crisis period we are actually keeping most of our services well functioning. So we are not suffering that much. We are not cut off from different interactions. So we have everything possible in case of voting, document management, etc. And then also we have had a start to paperless city government since 2003, so it's quite a long time ago. And what's important for the city, in my opinion, it's a startup mindset that we have in the city. that we are trying to be innovative and agile, but at the same time we are really considering that failures are also okay. So if you're failing in some project or in some activities, it's okay if you're learning from it. So basically, we are trying to let's say share this startup mindset between different partners we are partnering with, and then also to actually let others know about the approach we have in the city. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, it was a little bit too many slides. So just would like to start from a topic which is really important in my opinion, especially in small and medium-sized municipalities where we are lacking human resources and also competencies at the city level. So our success depends a lot on the external partner involvement. So basically, I really suggest that if you're representing smaller cities, take so seriously the different project management and consortium creation, because the partners you are partnering with, it's actually the foundation for the success of the project. So I'm just pointing out the example here. That's the example of the SmartEnCity project. We have 9 local partners. 5 of them are from public sector and 4 of them are from the private sector. And as you can see, it's quite well balanced. But I just wanted to highlight that if you are partnering with private companies, you might face some risks which you have to acknowledge. For example, in our case, we have 2 big companies like Telia and Fortum, which are well known in the Nordic countries. And those companies are powerful. They have a lot of know-how and knowledge to share. They are powerful in case of financing different activities, etc., etc. So basically, there's this kind of partners that you would always like to work with. And at the same time, if you are partnering with smaller companies, like we have Cityintel and the electric taxi company here in our city. Cityintel is a producer of street lighting management system. So there are certain issues that you have to pay attention to. So for example, they don't have quite often the possibility to back up employees. They cannot be sustainable in case of all the market fluctuations. They might also have serious cash flow issues. If there are appearing kind of extra costs, it's possible that they are not able to cover those. So this kind of information is, I think, very useful. If you are planning any kind of consortium, please be aware of this kind of risks. So to continue, some thoughts about how to overcome bureaucracy and legal barriers. So, for example, in case of bureaucracy, I have to say that whenever public sector is involved, it's quite hard to overcome bureaucracy. But please try to spend on it as little time as possible and focus on main activities that actually create value. And what is even more important, please do not create extra bureaucracy yourself, because it's quite easy to happen that you're asking for different reportings, whatever, feedback from different involved parties, and then you're finding people filling different forms and papers all the time. So in our case, for example, in case of SmartEnCity project, we have tried to make the data gathering as much automatic as possible. For example, if those buildings which we are retrofitting in the frame of the project, if those buildings we require data on the energy consumption, then we are trying to do it as much as possible automatically, not to ask people to fulfill different reports all the time. It's possible to do, and we are in direct connection with energy companies to ask for the data and etc. to create automatic links. And of course, it's also important to involve all those needed parties, also positions and institutions from the very beginning. For example, if you're trying to have good contact with energy management company, you have to explain about the background of the project, and then you can have easily the information access you need. But if you are just at a certain point of the project trying to approach and just ask for 1 or 2 questions and some data, you might receive resistance immediately. So it's important to keep partners involved from the very beginning, those partners who need to be involved. And about the legal aspects and legal barriers, I have to say that procurements in most of the European countries are highly regulated. And therefore, smart choice of partners is also important if you are starting any project. Because, for example, if you're trying to purchase any kind of innovation, then you have quite limited possibilities to do it, because most of the public procurements are still considering pricing as a main issue, and you cannot highlight those conditions to that level, conditions of the procurement to that level, that you can avoid those companies who are basically trying to offer you only price. So you have to reconsider for the first how it's actually possible to get rid of those partners which you are not actually willing to have on board, and how to limit and restrict access of those companies to those procurements. Of course, following all the regulations that you have in your certain countries. But in Tartu, we are trying to do it also as much as possible. And what we have also noticed in the frame of SmartEnCity project, for example, that if, for example, you are trying to retrofit privately owned buildings and keep the initiative from the public sector side, it's actually quite complicated. So you have to understand that you cannot make the decisions instead of the public, instead of the private owners. You have to always wait for the decision from the private sector. So if you are trying to initiate something, you clearly need to motivate people to speak a lot about all those, let's say, aspects related to, let's say, increasing motivation of people, and etc., etc. So it's a lot of explanations, a lot of engaging people, a lot of engaging different interested parties, etc., etc. And I certainly suggest, if you're having huge projects and you're trying really to implement it, please have a lawyer also in the team, to have a good connection to lawyer, because lawyers can see creative ways, if they are a good lawyer, of course. They can see creative ways how to overcome different obstacles arising on your way. And also legislation is not carved in the stone, especially at the municipal level, of course, but also at the state level. So it's possible to have changes in the legislation if they are actually helping you to achieve higher aims. So I certainly encourage to be creative in this field, also to overcome the legal barriers. So for the next, the slides are not changing. Bettina, somehow I have lost the connection to the slides. Maybe you can change the slide for me.
Yeah, I just changed it for you, and I'll make sure you have it for the next one as well.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much. So the next thing about economic barriers and how to ensure funding for projects. So for the first, I have to suggest that please take or undertake only those activities which you would go for despite of having external funding, because then you're doing the right things. If you're trying to work out any kind of new activities just for the project, it normally not working that well. So do those things that you are really intending to do, and those activities that you are actually ready to pay yourself. Of course, the matching with existing policies one of the keys. So if you are willing to have political support and also part of the city budget or public sector budget spent on the project, all those activities should match actually the policy that has been earlier approved. For example, if you have decided earlier that your city public transportation should be based on gas buses, biogas buses, whatever, then please do not surprise politicians with proposal for electric buses, because you should start from the right position. And for the first, you have to change the view and the policy, that the new policy is electric buses. And then you can ask for funding also for this kind of activities, because I have seen it several times also that you are learning from each other from different cities, and all of a sudden some kind of new activities are popping on the table, and then it's quite easy to receive negative feedback also from the political side if you are doing it like that. And of course, if you are speaking about funding, if you are speaking about how to ensure funding for different activities, it's important to involve private sector, because they have new business models which might be very helpful for yourself. For example, if you're trying to have renewable energy production on the facades, like PV panels, for example, it's not important if you have the panels on the public buildings, or it might be also on the private building, because it's giving the same effect at the end of the day. So basically, if you're trying to increase the share of renewable energy, you have to work with private sector if you are not having enough funds yourself as a public institution. Okay, let's continue from here. Bettina, can you help to change the slide? Okay. Another tip how to gain actually time. You need to involve all those partners from the very beginning that you are actually willing something to do. They have this kind of approach that if they are not informed from the beginning, that they are actually not belonging to the team. But if you are involving them from the very beginning and keep always informed, and also to involve those key positions and key partners to the management group, it's giving really good benefits in case of timing, because you are not losing too much time on different explanations later on if you are keeping all those partners updated on the way. And of course, to have regular meetings and recognize and actually address all those issues that are popping up, it's also really important that you are doing it in time, not to let some things develop further and then try to solve them, but to solve them as they appear on your radar. And of course, in case of political support, that's the same. Try to involve anyone from the politicians, local politicians, who is actually becoming your spokesman for the project or for the activities. And it's really important, because if you're standing in front of the politicians and trying to explain, you need the support from the political side also. And if you are having spokesman or even several spokesmen, then it's much easier to handle it. So continuously share information with the political side, and try to keep a good collaboration with politicians. So next slide, please. And last but not least, I would like to speak about the citizen engagement, which is really important. But at the same time, I have to say that we should not try to be only creative here and use those modern channels for citizen engagement. But in our case, also in case of the SmartEnCity project, we have tried to use basically every channel that is available, because we know that people are different, and and they are receiving information from different channels. So some of the people are only willing to have face-to-face meetings. That's the only channels they are willing to get information from. Some of the people are preferring reading from newspapers. Some of the people are preferring to receive leaflets. Some of the people are only coming if the event is kind of entertaining. So basically, you have to assure entertainment also for people, but also to use those modern technology tools like online involvement of people. So that's everything I encourage you to do, but also to be creative. Please, the last slide, Bettina. And I'm bringing here one of the examples. So in Tartu, in the frame of SmartEnCity project, we had this kind of ambassador program. It basically means that we prepared some of the citizens to be ambassadors among other citizens, among the people in the retrofitted buildings who have good knowledge about indoor climate, for example, about home expenses, sustainable renovation, waste and sustainable development, also smart home, etc., etc. So to have educated people who are becoming your ambassadors and who are speaking to other citizens and who are able to share our policy or our points of view to a wider range of people. So that's, in my opinion, one very good example of the citizen engagement actions. And that's actually all I wanted to speak right now within this short period of time. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Raymond, for your presentation and for your very well structured and comprehensive advice and information. Thank you very much. I'm sure that the audience will have many questions to address to you during our discussion panel. But now it is time to go to our third lighthouse city, which is Vitoria-Gasteiz, the capital of the Basque Country in Spain. And I would like to give the floor to Juan Carlos Escudero. Juan Carlos Escudero has a bachelor in biological sciences, and he works for the Environmental Studies Center of Vitoria-Gasteiz. He has been working there for almost 30 years with different responsibilities. He has been director of the center as well. And he's working currently in the areas of environmental information, research, innovation, and development applied to the urban environment. As the head of Information and Innovation Unit, he's in charge of implementing and energizing innovative strategies concerning sustainable mobility, energy, food, and climate policies. So, Juan Carlos, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fran. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your kind introduction. Good afternoon, and welcome from the Basque Country, from the city of Vitoria-Gasteiz. I hope all of you stay safe wherever you are now. It's a real pleasure to stay here this afternoon, and I'll try to do my best to contribute to this successful lesson this afternoon. Okay, let me switch off the camera to start with the presentation. Okay, and I would like to introduce briefly in my presentation how we are using community engagement strategies within a particular action is being developed in our city as a lighthouse member of the SmartEnCity project, and focus particularly in energy efficient housing retrofitting in the Coronation neighborhood. Next slide, Bettina, please. No, stay. The previous one. Sorry, the previous slide. So let me. No, the previous one. Okay, yeah. So the next one. Yes, I would like to. Yeah, that's one. Thank you, Bettina. Yes, I would like to do a brief introduction to the context of the city of Vitoria. Vitoria is a 250,000 inhabitant city located in the north of Spain. It's the capital city of the Basque Country. And as you can see here in the image, the city has a clear compact urban structure. After a long tradition, urban policy started many decades ago. No? It's an industrial city that had a very important growth during the 60s, a period of an unprecedented industrial development when the city doubled the population in only 10 years. And when it was the fastest growing city population of the country of Spain, with an annual growth close to 9%. So next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. Well, I'm focusing into the context to accommodate such a high number of people around the existing city. New neighborhoods with a medium height building density were built during the 60s, such as the Coronation neighborhood, northwest to the medieval quarter, or like many other more, all of them aging neighborhoods that are becoming nowadays more and more a real challenge in urban livability in Vitoria-Gasteiz. With nearly 2,500 residents, Coronation neighborhood, marked with the green line, has one of the highest aging indexes in our city, with 25% of the population over 65. A very high index of foreign population, around 21%, and with family incomes 27% lower than the city average. So nearly 30% of the families live in rented dwellings. So next, please. Next slide, Bettina, please. Okay. In any case, the participation within the SmartEnCity project for Vitoria-Gasteiz, it's been a real opportunity to test the retrofitting policies to be applied in the future, not only in the pilot area of Coronation, but also for the rest of the aging neighborhoods from the 60s. The project, with a total budget of 25 million euro, has the main objective to do with energy efficient housing retrofitting together with a district heating network, and at the same time as a huge opportunity to improve the public space in the pilot area according to the policies the city is working with within the Sustainable Mobility and Public Space Plan. Next slide. Bettina? Okay. In addition to the important socioeconomic challenge mentioned before, the lack of district heating culture and the strong technology component of the project made it necessary to endow the project with a specific citizen engagement strategy. So, as Frank has introduced before, a main, if not the main challenge in the project is or has been how such an action like this one, it's going to be accepted, understood, and decided by the population. And that is because an ambitious plan was designed to develop during the project. Apart from more conventional approaches like exhibitions, mailings, door-to-door campaigns, information offices, etc., etc. So next slide. Let me focus in a specific action that was implemented in order to engage the community. And for instance, it was decided to use from the very beginning an opportunity dealing with the public space opportunities in the area. So using co-design with the residents for the final public space after the district heating implementation works to together with a public consultation. To do it, a €2 million budget has been provided by the City Council for such an action support, and we consider it will be a good opportunity to connect the opportunities to improve the livability of the public space as a way also to communicate the other aims of the project. Let's go with the next one. For instance, even the people had the chance to enjoy during the car-free day of the European Mobility Week a street festival, for instance, showing them the public realm that could be possible after the implementation of some of the final designs, and also a real opportunity to sell then also the advantages of the energy efficient housing retrofitting. So as Raymond has introduced before, we were trying to use the different channels to arrive into the people. So like this kind of festivals, or for instance, using also the priest at the main church in order also to arrive into other parts of the community. So trying to use as much as possible different channels in order to engage more and more people in a project that has important barriers for the not only from the cultural point of view, but also from the economic point of view. Let's go. Next one. Okay. What is true is that the main challenge has been the commercialization of the retrofitting and connection to the district heating supply. Even more, taking into account the socioeconomic profile, that there is no tradition of neighborhood scale heating infrastructure in the south of Europe. And that is the reason of action like the workshop for the final design of the public space that I introduced. Besides a long list of citizen engagement actions distributed across the timeline of the project, as it's shown in the graph, together with the homeowners' accessions to the project, the growing line. So this way has been possible to have more and more communities engaged to the project. And finally, we are nowadays arriving to the final phase of the project with the final implementation of the district heating network. So it was needed to arrange radio campaigns, public informative events, meetings with communities of homeowners, phone calls, an important door-to-door campaign to visit the people who were not visiting us directly at the information office, visits to other pilots in the surrounding cities, and so on. Next one. Next one, and the last one. Yeah, okay. Once closed the accession period, 32 communities are being retrofitted and connected to the district heating, apart from the replication effect of this project, because at this moment there are 5 additional buildings of the demo area that are being retrofitted, and some additional ones around are also starting working in this area apart from the project. And to conclude, the city is learning a lot about how to proceed with such kind of interventions in order to replicate in the other aging neighborhoods. And I consider that it's important to highlight that not only those city areas, but also a large part of the neighborhoods of many other Spanish cities have socioeconomic situations similar to Coronación. So the experience gained is going to be very useful in the renovation to be implemented in the future in this kind of neighborhoods. So, and that's all. Thank you everybody for listening, and I'll be again on the round table later. Bye.
Thank you very much, Juan Carlos, for this very interesting example of citizen engagement action in your city. And yeah, let me take the opportunity to take it where you left it and let everyone know that in the project website, SmartEnCity.eu, many materials describing these actions, project deliverables like the one Juan Carlos was mentioning before, and other learning materials are available. I'm sure many of you have already visited the website, but in case you haven't, I think it's really worthwhile that you visit the website and check our materials with many descriptions of these actions. Well, after Juan Carlos, we have our fourth speaker for the day, Dr. Baha Kuban. Baha is an expert in clean energy technologies, urban climate change, and policy. He obtained his Master of Sciences in Material Science from the University of British Columbia, and later his PhD in Engineering Science in Louisiana State University in the USA. He formerly worked in the glass industry in Turkey as a research engineer and business development manager, but in 2007, he started working for Ecofis as a senior consultant in the areas of clean energy technologies, climate change strategy, and policy. In 2009, he became a partner and manager in CleanGlow, a solar PV consulting and engineering firm, and he's currently the managing partner in Demir Energy. He's working in solar electricity, sustainable cities, eco-innovation, and the transition and climate change management and policies. Some of the key public and private sector projects that he was involved are the Technology Projects Evaluation and Environmental Technology Advisory Committee, the elaboration of energy efficiency programs for the industrial SMEs in Turkey, between others. Baha is working also on development and coordination of smart cities and communities projects in the Horizon 2020 call, and he's also a member of Sensen Lake Smart and Sustainable City Sector Forum, working towards European smart city standards. So, long introduction, but I think it will be very worthwhile to hear Baha and what he has to say on the subject. His presentation is called The Ambivalent Transition, and thank you, Baha, for being here today, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Francisco. Let me provide some evidence that I'm not a robot first at the beginning. Well, wishing everybody greetings from Istanbul, first of all, and I'm wishing everyone a virus-free day, week, month. Hopefully, everyone will be coming out of this scratch-free. Of course, one can't help. I'm switching off the video now. One can't help. Before going to the talk, I would like to offer some tuppence on pandemic times. Does this have any impact on smart city transformations that we think about smart cities? Pandemic times, I think, is not a blip in our lives. It's going to have some repercussions in the way we organize things, in the way we think of smart city transformations. I think when you come down to smart cities, I think we will think more about social resilience and grassroots empowerment and things like that. It's striking, of course, that the virus has in a matter of a month or so, cleaned up the air in the cities and in China. It's incredible how much the air quality has improved, of course, without the presence of transport and industry to a large extent. Of course, things are not going to change in a very radical way, perhaps, but we may start thinking of a new normal. In the way that we look at the world and nature as human beings, as a part of the natural processes rather than on top of them. So I'm thinking that there may be actually some kind of changes in the way we look at smart city transformations also. What I would like to talk about very briefly today is try and introduce some food for thought in smart city transformation management, some of the conceptual premises that we have used in our projects, I will come to Urban at the very end, very shortly. But when we think about transitions literature that has been fed a lot of good information and studies from the development thinking and also the social construction of technology studies, which are now informing many disciplines in this area. And we look at the smart city transition also as a large socio-technical transition with complex historical roots in it. This is the main tenet of the talk that I would like to give before I touch ground on a smart city example. We can introduce some new terminology to the smart city transition. Basically, we're talking about technology-led or market-led transitions. We have some examples from the world, as you know, completely technology-led and private industry or private interest-led transition, or at least part transition of a smart city in Toronto, like the Sidewalk Toronto example. But then we have, for example, larger scale examples in Masdar, which is also a technology-led transition, but this time completely in the hands of the state. And then also perhaps Songdo in South Korea, which is also technology-driven, strongly supported by the state. But we can say that all these four concepts or drivers can come together in combinations, depending on the historical development or the nature of the city itself. What is becoming prevalent is dependent on the contextual circumstances. But the idea is that I'm trying to move the slides, Bettina, but I am also not able, I think. Yes, can you help me please with the slides? Yeah. Okay, so these are the main tenets that I have been trying to talk about. We're talking about the complex historical process and insights from the transitions literature. And there's an urgent need to link what we have as socio-technical narratives to socio-political agendas and historically informed analysis at intersections of power, politics, economy, technology, and social classes. This is what the transitions literature tells us. And of course, experimentation is nothing new in urban development. Smart cities is a city experiment par excellence, of course, when you look at the history of urban experiments, some of which have failed tragically, some of which have achieved some success, but there's this the contextuality and transitional arrangements dimensions to smart cities literature that we need to take into account when we think about smart cities. I have termed the presentation the ambivalent transition because of the need to fill meaning and value into the transition. This can be done, as I will talk about it in practical ways, but we need to think about some of the new. In the next slide, Bettina, please. We can talk about some of the new terminologies. For example, we talk about transient interests, coalitions of interests, fractions of capital in, let's say, a local government-driven smart city vision. The most important thing here, of course, is a political economy analysis. Again, historically informed analysis on what may drive the transition and what may actually prevent it or slow it down. So this idea of fractions of capital actually opens the door to involving actors in the transition that may not have your long-term vision that, let's say, has a 100% carbon-free city, climate-friendly approaches, and all these things. But we may have some coalitions of interests, and we may have some of the powerful players on board with a shorter time frame and a shorter agenda but we can involve them in the various commissions. We have termed them coordination committees for different, especially in the context of urban, where we have the 3 pillars of smart cities in terms of ICT, transportation, and energy in the built environment. We can talk about these transformative alliances, which are embodied in the coordination committees. And as I said, these are transitionary interests that carry the vision only until they actually have their own interest. So we can have a coalition of interests that in transport, for example, that supports both the private companies, citizen interests, greening of the city, and many other different parts, or air quality, for example, that come together and forward our issue to a certain point. In the context of urban, we have, of course, extended this to a much larger urban regeneration model, which actually is a very technical concept with lots of different types of software tools behind it. But we prefer to think about the transition in the terms that I have just explained to you, as an experimentation of transitional arrangements. And in the case of sometimes, of course, you have to have exact terms used by cities. For example, in a Turkish case, in Eskişehir, we have the strongest transformative alliance has been formed in the ICT cluster, which is active since I think a year and a half or 2 years at least, and it sort of functions as a coordination committee for the ICT sector. There's many priorities that the city would like to put. Some of these topics may be more important for the city than the others. And as I said, sometimes we don't come across these terms like coordination committees or transformative alliances, but the cities are already doing these things in their historical approach to problems regarding energy efficiency, renewable energy expansion, or public transport expansion, etc. I think Nottingham is another important example in this case, especially in the transport sector. In the way that they have behaved in let's say confirming that transitionary approaches are useful in the long run, looking at this transition as a long-term vision, but creating little niches that actually power the transition towards the right direction. So I would like to reiterate the main terminologies, talking about, of course, local government-driven smart city visions. We have a smart urban transformation council at the top of the things. This is a basically narrative construction or entity. This is formed of city leaders, people who can, activate the public imagination, and of course the head of the local government, but also powerful interests are in there represented. And then this actually comes up with the plans and the long-term strategies, which are then implemented by the coordination committees of the city, formed according to these, it can be different names or different areas, but they basically represent the transformative alliances. Okay, so actually I have only 2 slides. This was the end of it, and I would like to continue by answering questions. I think if it can create some food for thought, that would be satisfactory. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Baha, for this nice balancing, theoretical balancing of our previous very practical and very hands-on presentations. I think that now we have some time, a bit more than half an hour, for the roundtable discussion. Now is the time for you, the audience, to ask questions. I hope presentations, the 4 presentations have inspired your questions. So you can use the chat box in your screen to shoot your question to the speakers. And before you start, and to give you some time to formulate your questions, I have some questions that I get from you as well, because as you know, we have been asking for your needs and questions beforehand in the questionnaire. So before we are taking questions from the live audience, we would like to start with a couple of questions that you previously sent to us through this questionnaire I mentioned. So I think that a very interesting topic that has been brought and is also subject of some questions is how to gain this political support, how to have the first spark to initiate the movement. And related to political support, first question I have for the speakers is what can cities do? What is really needed to do when the city council in the city is not that interested in climate change? Because I mean, cities have their own agenda. Some of them are very aware, very conscious of climate change, others not so much. So how can we engage with politicians? How can we strengthen the political support? I can throw this question to the field and let any one of you answer to me.
Maybe I can start from here. It's Raimond from Tartu. So in my opinion, it's also necessary to educate politicians, because if you are not educating politicians, they probably do not know about all those climate change related issues and etc. etc. So I suggest to start from informing before making decisions. And if informing has been done and decisions are still not following, then any of the politicians will definitely be enlightened or lighted or somehow. So I believe that it's a good point to start from.
Okay,
Francisco,
yes.
I would like to provide some notes on that. Of course, given the fact that we have a smart city project, we are most likely talking about a city government that is in favor of some kind of transition. But even if we think that we don't have strong enough, let's say, buying in for the local council, the local government, this is where in the presentation I talked about a political economy analysis of the city. This may give us some interesting clues as to which are the stronger groups in favor of the transition. This may be a lobby of energy interests around renewable energies, for example, or it could be many other things, but it could sort of balance out the power structure in such a transition. So we need to look at it. Will change from city to city, but often the case is that we have a local government that is supportive, but central government entities in the city, because the city has all these as well, and most of the time the commercial interests not favorably inclined. So I think it's a good idea to start from the analysis of the contextual situation.
Okay.
Yeah. Juan Carlos speaking. Yes, I agree with Raimond that probably is needed to educate, but not only the politicians, but also the citizens, because we consider that if the citizens are demanding it, they will follow them. So that is because it's really important to have a clear policy towards environmental awareness and trying to train and to show the people what are the main challenges in an open way, to try to share with them the main challenges of the city and what could be done. So after that, if they agree and they demand these kind of policies, it will be more and more difficult for the politicians to be out. So I consider that many times it's not adapted so clear, these kind of approaches.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much, Juan Carlos. If no one else wants to react to my first question.
This is Peter from Sonderborg. I completely agree with what already have been commented, but I think nowadays a lot of things is happening in our schools, in cities where they have district heating or produce electricity together. If there's a house association who added solar panels to the roof, I mean, there's in sport facilities, there's already communities nowadays where this is part of the DNA of the mindset. I agree with Raymond saying don't push all expectations to the city council. The story I told was about a city council that adopted a vision, the ProjectZero vision, created outside the city council, but it's part of the planning of the mindset of the city council today. So I think the ProjectZero Sonderborg story is also a story of how this can happen outside, but I think long term you need the city council to be on board to get to your destination, because it really needs to be part of your DNA. So look out for a school, and I think most schools have heard about Greta. Maybe you have a Greta in your own city. Also in Sonderborg, our Greta is a he, but I don't care about if it's a he or she, but things happens in your city. Look out if you have district heating for this company, what they are planning to do, and you will find out there's a lot of transition already going on. Help these small communities make their story more robust, help them calculate maybe the carbon emission or express the resource saving, the resource efficiency, and link some of them together to have the good stories spread. Help them get into the newspapers, the online magazines, the Facebook. I mean, then suddenly it becomes the new DNA of a city or of a municipality. So I think this is really how things can develop from ground, and hopefully a lot will happen before it hits the city council. When it hits the city council, it can be fueled by a lot of political vision. So all schools should be built to this standard or retrofitted. It should be part of what you learn in school. It should be part of any sport facility in the municipality. I mean, this is the power of the politicians. Raymond knows better than any of us that it can really be amplified by the politicians, but don't wait for the politicians.
Yes, thank you very much, Peter. And it's perfect, because this brings me to the next question. Obviously, when you speak about community, it shows that you have lots of experience in organizing different stakeholders, and your work in Sonderborg shows. Then the next question I wanted to address in principle to you and then to the rest of our field is, when we speak about a governance structure for transition, is there any one-size-fits-all structure that can be applied to many cities, or this is really a very specific task for each one of the cities that needs to find their own balance between different stakeholders? What's your experience in this?
Yeah, this is Peter again. If I may start the iteration here, I don't think there's a one size fits everything. I mean, a municipality or city council has its political desire, vision, ambition, and it's important to get your climate energy vision, transition vision into that mindset, thinking, the planning. But I also see in Denmark, even I think Denmark is considered to be in the forefront, that there are very, very different stages of development. Some of the municipalities, as we call the cities here, are driven much more by individual citizen initiatives. Some of the municipalities, we see that the city council have adopted this vision of the citizens, or of it could also be private companies who have influenced. In Sonderborg, it's also influenced by private company mindset. So I think it's a question of inspiring each other across municipalities, which we really give a lot of attention to across Denmark. We are part of different national initiatives that can help us share the lessons learned and speed up this development. We all across Denmark, we are 20 municipalities who are right now developing next level integrated plans following the C40, the CD40 planning framework, which is, I can tell you, very, very ambitious for all of us. But I think this is also learning from each other, and also having our citizens, our companies, our municipal employees in different departments function, sharing their knowledge, their views. I think this is another way to have it spread. And I think we come from different tradition, different background, different DNA, but I think the direction looks like the same. We all have to speed up the transition, and none of us have come to our destination yet. So there's a lot of space for sharing and learning.
Yeah, I surely agree that the situation is different in different countries. For example, in Estonia, municipalities are quite independent in decision making. I know that in many other countries, the state level has much more power over municipalities, for example. That's why also in our case in Tartu, we can make most of the decisions by ourselves. We do not need, let's say, the state to be somehow involved. So we sometimes only expect funding from the state side, but most of the activities we can implement without intervening from the state side. And then of course the society and also different institutions who are driving the policy, they are actually also, I think, existing in all the countries. But just how much different municipalities are hearing or actually willing to hear from the external partners, that's for me one of the key issues here. And if the willingness to engage people, to engage different private sector institutions and companies, if the willingness is existing, then it's working the best.
Okay, a couple of words from me, One. Obviously, we all agree that a social technical transition is not an aircraft you can just land in any airport and anywhere in the world. Obviously, you need to get together a couple of things, like, for example, a long-term vision that is shared by a lot of people, and the money that goes with it. But there's many ways of putting these things together. One of the interesting points of the transition theory, especially from the Dutch school, headed perhaps the best representative is René Kemp. But this experimental urbanism, let's say, looking at sustainable transitions in a way of experiments, and trying experiments in a way that you can step back and actually better it, or let's say correct it. So you do things that do experiments in, let's say, energy transitions or transportation and urban planning, that you don't do them in a way that you cannot change them forever. You do experiments that are piecemeal, and they go with the popular will, and there's the strong money and vision, the part that I just said behind it. But then you can, this can always turn as a bad experiment. For example, when you look at a lot of the urban experiments in the 19th and 20th centuries, they turned out to be big fiascos and actually tragedies for a lot of cities. For example, the American cities, they got rid of public transportation for the car, building huge highways, and this famous experiments of urban planning by Robert Moses, for example, in New York. So the idea of the social construction of socio-technical systems is that you go piecemeal, and you go with as much caution as possible, thinking that you may be actually wrong. So this experimental urbanism is one dimension of the approach that I think can be propounded.
Thank you, Baha. I think it is now time to give voice to our audience and maybe see if there are some questions from the floor. I think, Heike, maybe you have some questions already for our speakers.
Yes, Fran. I have collected quite a few questions regarding stakeholders, citizen engagement, and more. Maybe we start with a question, very practical one. What criteria was laid to select the stakeholders amongst the citizens and private organizations? So how to select the stakeholders?
Who wants to answer this one?
I can try and give my thoughts and our experience from Sonderborg. As I briefly mentioned in my presentation, we segmented or divided our opportunities and challenges into 8 segments. One of them was called the businesses or the business segment, and it related to all that businesses, small businesses, big companies. We have the biggest industrial company, has its headquarters in Sonderborg, that's the Danfoss company. But how these very different businesses, how they can contribute by saving energy, convert their energy consumption into renewable, and contribute in a digital and smart way. I mean, the experience from having private businesses on board, you need to go for not only the expert, you need to go for the top management of the private companies. And that is, I've discussed that with other municipalities. This is sometimes a bit tough call to call the managing director of a company and ask for a discussion or a meeting. But as I mentioned today, this is actually much easier than it was 10 years back, where the climate challenge was not on top of the mind and company challenges. So I think you should really go for the top of also the big organizations. But we also have shops on board. We have real estate agents on board, and there it's maybe not. There's not probably a managing director, but then it's the owner you need to engage. And my own background is working in private companies, and I also know from past experience that once you have the owner on board here, you really have you'll have a strong commitment. We have seen that with a lot of companies here in Sonderborg, not only small companies, big companies. Once they are on board, they understand the challenge, they understand what's in it for them and what's in it for society. They give their heart away. They don't give all their money away, but they give their heart and a lot of passion, and therefore they are also very active investors in the transition. So go for the top of the organization, but prepare well.
Maybe just to add a little bit on the top of the Peter's topic. In Tartu, for example, we are always starting from the activity side. So if we have this kind of understandings that, for example, district cooling is something that really has impact on our CO2 emissions, then we are starting to consider which companies are working with district cooling or which companies might work with district cooling. And then we are trying to find the most capable and most future-oriented company among of those companies, which could probably be our partners. And then we can have this kind of negotiations and discussions. And then finally, we are choosing the partner. So it's always activity-based. We are not normally starting from the company side. Let's say, like we have a wonderful company here, and let's try to do something with the company. So normally we are starting from the activities which bring most impact.
Juan Carlos speaking. Yeah. Well, in our case, the criteria adopted to select the stakeholders was no different than the criteria we are using for the rest of projects or strategies the city is working with. So it's needed from the very beginning to try to draft the different barriers or the different challenges to be solved. And this way is possible, and it's the only way to determine in a clear way what are the tools or what are the stakeholders to be contacted and to be included from the very beginning. So that was the approach. So not different than the usual one. So I think it's the only way.
Thank you very much, Juan Carlos. I think this first question from the audience has had a good answers, good set of answers from the speakers. So maybe we can take a jump to the next one already.
Yeah, once you have selected the stakeholders, it leads directly into the next practical question, how to keep momentum in the core of the stakeholders. So have you got a trick or an advice how to keep the pace, to keep the level of engagement?
Yeah, I have a couple of suggestions here. For the first, please try to keep them informed about the project activities, not only about the activities which are only related to their activities, but overall, try to involve them also into the project management board somehow, and also entertain them. Have this kind of entertaining events where you have more unofficial like environment, and then it's possible to have really a good team feeling at the end of the day. Okay, that's shortly.
This is Peter from Sonderborg. I completely agree. We also invited our stakeholders or ambassador group, as we also call it. I noticed you use the same, into a climate high school where we had a number of professors talking about the climate challenge. We never, from a more theoretical research point of view, this was really a new initiative. We found that not only a strong performance or a lot of our so-called ambassadors showed up and participated. Some of them we never expected them to do, but they wanted to learn more from climate change. But I think my strong advice is, as Raymond also mentioned, remember them, keep them informed, but also build them and their good practice into your storytelling of the city. So, I mean, this is also a way where you can pay back not always mentioning the same good example, the same person, the same company, or the same house association, or school, or kindergarten, but you need to build them into your press releases as the good examples. We had an example here because one of our bank managers took an excellent initiative, and we also circulated this in the local press that this initiative was taken by this bank. And I think this is very much appreciated, especially by private sector business people, that you take also care and help them open doors, because it's a win-win situation for everybody, what we do together.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you for these very practical answers. I hope
I can just one addition to that, if possible.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
Yeah, what I would like to say, I will venture to argue that motivating everybody is not going to be possible by good intentions alone. If you look at the historical transitions, we have a combination of regulation and incentive to put together a large transition like this. It's not enough to just expect good intentions and good behavior from everybody, because there's vested interest. And as I said, when you do the political economy analysis, you will see that there is going to be a lot of resistance to change. So what you need to do is regulation is very important. You may not be able to do it in the matter of 2 or 3 years that you're doing the project, but you can build, let's say, an acceleration towards it. You can build some public pressure towards it. You can use public pressure, the population's will, and for example, for air quality and things like that. So I think there needs to be a combination of a carrot and stick for the social technical transition to work.
Right. Thank you for your comments and your answers. Very practical. I think that's what our participants are asking for. Hopefully you are all satisfied. If not, please feel free to use the chat box anytime, and we will raise your questions now and later. So the next cluster of questions all about citizen engagement. So how to engage citizens in the realization of the necessary changes, for instance, apart from brainstorm session and workshops, what can you do to engage citizens? And especially there was one question addressed to Juan Carlos. Maybe we can start with you. You were talking about your citizen engagement toolbox. So can you say a few more words to explain that? Or anybody else can start with an engagement toolbox.
Yes, the aim behind my presentation has been to focus in a particular action under implementation within the SmartEnCity project, but that is not the only one. So I mean, directly related with this action, we are nowadays drafting a participatory process, for instance, trying to involve neighbors together with a public design school in a specific workshop focus with earth painting some walls for some of the buildings under renovation in the neighborhood. And the idea is to use this way to improve the community links with the project. So this is, for example, one of the examples, no? But this kind of community engagement approaches should be supported by a long list of different actions we are trying to implement during the whole timeline of the project, and take it into account which are the different phases of the project. So because not during the 5.5 years of the project, the focus should be put in the same stakeholders or in the same elements. For instance, at the beginning, could be interesting to try to train the people about what is needed that we are trying to implement in the neighborhood, and why we consider this so important, and why the barriers they could have are barriers that could be solved, and that that it's important to try to go on. But for instance, in other parts of the process or other part of the timelines, there are other needs must be solved. So probably the tools, the procedures, the ways to approach to the people or to different stakeholders should be different. So, and that is because we are trying to enlist all the different approaches we are using within the project in a toolbox. First of all, in order to be applied, if they are successful or in this way, to be applied for the rest of the neighborhoods in Vitoria. And why not? Yes, we agree, as our partners have stated before, that there is no one size fit for all selection. There is no on the self approach to be directly implemented everywhere, no? But why not? Probably there are many specific actions that we have to implement it here in Vitoria, in this neighborhood, that could be adapted in order to be implemented in other cities in South Europe or other parts of the world. Why not?
Right. Thank you for that. Any more comments on citizen engagement toolboxes, what to do, how to engage citizens?
Okay, in that case, I think it's about time to end the roundtable discussion, unless, Heike, you have one more question, burning question that you want to ask.
Maybe the last very short one, it was a general understanding of citizen engagement. Is it more to disseminate some information, or is it for approval from the citizens? So maybe this is an important one.
Yeah, it is, indeed.
It depends. Yes.
Okay, we all want to answer. Raymond,
yeah,
go on.
I just wanted to say that it depends on the activity. So if there is something that you will, let's say, implement anyway, it doesn't matter what you are receiving as a feedback from citizens, then I propose that you are saying it honestly, that we are just informing you that this kind of changes are going to happen, and don't ask for feedback if you are planning to implement it anyway. So if you are really willing to have the feedback from people, then you should definitely ask also for the feedback from people and comment and proposals and etc. That's a very short comment from my side.
It's Peter from Sonderborg. When we talk about citizen engagement for our 19,000 homeowner families, it's not about them knowing what's going on in the city council or the Sonderborg energy transition, but it's to have their active participation, to have them invest in heat pumps or joint district heating solutions, to have them insulate their homes much better, to install PV panels. So this is in my language the ultimate participation. This is when citizens start doing what needs to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. Very clear, Peter. Thank you very much. And now I think, yeah, it's 4 o'clock. It's the time we have fixed for the end of the session today. I really hope you have enjoyed the session and that you can take away something from our speeches and presentations. And I would like to hand over again to Bettina so she can present the next lesson in some weeks for you. So Bettina, please.
Yes, thank you, Fran. Thank you very much for the great moderation, and of course, thank you again to the speakers as well. I had the feeling that there were a lot of, or I know that there were a lot of questions in the chat box coming in to us, and I'm sorry that we couldn't maybe not answer all of them. So maybe if one of your questions could not be answered now during the discussion round, you can just send us an email with the question, or you can fill in the questionnaire that we will send around afterwards with a couple of feedback questions. So you can raise your question there again, and then we will make sure to follow up with you afterwards, because the goal is really to leave no questions unanswered for the session. So yeah, let me very briefly introduce the upcoming course also to you. As you know, this training course consists of overall 4 lessons, and 2 now have already taken place. There will be 2 more in the course of 2020, and in the other 2 that will come up, we will again have external speakers, so as we had Baha for this time. So the 3rd session will take place on the 4th of June at 2 p.m. again, and it will focus on the topic of city analysis and diagnosis. And for this panel discussion, we are very happy to announce that Alice Daniela Torres from the Covenant of Mayors will join our discussion as an external speaker. The SmartEnCity specialists of Lesson 3 will be Ivanka Pandeliva-Dimova from the Sofia Energy Center. She will represent our follower city Azenovgrad. And then we also have Simon Stendorf-Sorensen from Plan Energy, who will represent our lighthouse city Sonderborg. And this 3rd panel discussion will be moderated by our SmartEnCity project partner Michele De Santis from RENA Consulting. As you know, with this training course, we really want to address your needs and answer your questions. Therefore, sorry for that. Therefore, we will be sending out a short feedback questionnaire afterwards with 2 to 3 questions, where you can raise, again, questions that might be unanswered from today. But most importantly, you can also address your questions that you would like to be discussed for the next session, where we focus on diagnosis and city analysis. And if you feel like you would need even further or maybe more specific information or support, you can always also join our SmartEnCity network and benefit from many special activities as well. You can either just go directly to the SmartEnCity network website, or you can go to our general website and then click on network to find information there. Okay, so that's it. We have reached the end of the 2nd lesson. Thank you all very much for joining. Please all stay healthy. That's probably the most important right now. And we'll see you all again on the 3rd lesson on the 4th of June. So thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you, Bettina. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, Bettina. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Everybody, bye.
Thanks, mate.